All right, it is 10:03. I call us to order. I'm so out of sorts. There's no other citizens for citizens comment, correct?
Correct.
No minutes to pass. I don't have the agenda in front of me. No old business. So we're straight to Tracy, correct?
Yes, and Aiden is logging in now.
Fantastic. Tracy, thank you so much for meeting with us again. We were very impressed with you, and we wanted to get to know you a little bit more. I think, having two people interview in a half an hour made it kind of difficult for us to get, a lot of questions asked and that sort of thing. So one of the things that I wanted to start off with is, we as a park district and a committee are in a bit of a different place now than we were when we started this work. I think when we started, we didn't really know what we were looking for, what it is that we needed to do. And because we have a clear idea of where we're headed now, we wanted to make sure that as we move forward, we're continuing our work as opposed to starting over, if that makes sense. So out of curiosity, was there anything that you wanted to bring up again, or any unfinished thoughts that you felt you had from the last time that we spoke?
No, I feel like I'm not, to be fair, because it only was like 30-minute conversation, so I'm not completely clear on where exactly you all are at. And so I think that would also help me get a better understanding of what it is that you need and kind of the pathway for you all. I know that will come, I guess, in more time as I get to know you all and talk to everyone. But I think having a better understanding of kind of where you all left off, I think would give me a better sense of kind of making sure that the work is continuing versus starting over.
I agree, because I feel like that was something that we didn't get to cover at all when we spoke last time. So to give you an idea, so we were working with Dr. Pat Effiam, who passed away recently. For various reasons, due to her health conditions, we didn't quite make as much progress as I think we would have made otherwise. But so she did do an assessment. She did, and we have a copy of that you would absolutely, have access to. She did an assessment to kind of gauge not only, in a sense, kind of public opinion about Ridgeville. She did a lot of individual interviews and spoke to a good amount of people. We also had a survey that I believe, that'll correct me if I'm wrong, is still up on the website, available for people to fill out in terms of their experience with the park district. One of the other things that Dr. Effiam did that I felt was a really important piece of the evaluation was she also went through and checked essentially police reports to see if she could find a correlation between anything that was happening at the park districts with how often the police were being called to Ridgeville property. So she did, a good amount of investigating on those things. She also went through, policy, procedure, and charter, and even gave us a list of things that she felt could be written better. And she also walked us through her own equity training. And all of those are recorded and on the Ridgeville YouTube site. So if you want to take a peek at those to get an idea of exactly what it is that we did. What I will say is, having gone through other equity trainings, the way that I described Pat's training as being a little bit different is some of the other, so I've done SEED. I did a little bit of training through the Equity Institute through, I believe they're back up and running now. They have those cohorts of preschools going through for equity training. So I was a part of that when I was working at one of the schools previously that I'm no longer at, so I'm not a part of it now. But in the other equity training that I did, the way that I described it was kind of, the trainers would bring us to the garden and explain to us the flowers that were in the garden, right? Whereas I felt Pat was more, she brought us into the garden and there was nothing planted and told us what to plant. So I feel like her approach was a little different from what I had experienced in other situations. And I found it very valuable. It was perfect for me for what I needed to help me wrap up a lot of the other training and, package it up and be able to put it to use. So that's, and she gave us an equity lens, but we never got training on how to use it.
Mm.
Although it's in my opinion, it's well written, it's easy to follow. But even so, it's not something that I feel that we really should be putting to use without getting some more information of how that actually gets done and not just assuming we know how to walk through those questions.
And when you say equity lens, is it just kind of like a statement, or is it something like a toolkit that kind of questions you as you think about programs or policies and things like that?
It's a toolkit. So we also do have an equity statement that's on the website. And a lot of the, if you look on the equity page on the Ridgeville website, it also has terminology and definition. All of those things that we received in training has all been posted on the website. But the equity lens in particular is a series of questions. So it's not just a statement of like, this is what our goal is when we're having these thoughts. It is a multi-question. I kind of envision it as a flow chart, even though it's not set up that way, but in my mind, it kind of functions as a flow chart to walk you through, who's impacted, who's at the table, who's not at the table, how are you going to contact them?
Good.
From the little bit of research that I've done, it seems to be a really well-written equity lens, but that's something that we would absolutely want, some feedback on. And if there's any, if there's any, revisions or anything along those lines, we'd be open to making those changes.
Can I chime in as well? Is that allowed to answer Tracy's questions?
Yes.
Okay. So to go, I agree with everything JC said, but to go back one question, I just think that bringing anyone up to speed about what we've done and why should definitely include sort of a general summary type thing that explains that the reason we started working with Dr. Effiam in the first place is that we as a park district were experiencing a lot of, and I shouldn't say a lot, it was like a few individuals alleging racism at our park district, but not saying anything specific about what they thought was racist or why. And those people were very effective at rallying other people to this cause, so to speak, of let's go, yell at the park district for being racist. But again, it was not clear what the claims really even were. And when we dug a little deeper into it, there were claims like your programming doesn't have anybody but white people in it. And, that's an incorrect statement because factually, it's just incorrect. But we weren't taking demographics at that point in time. So we actually didn't have data to show in one direction or another. And then discussions started about things like, well, your programming registration should look like the composition of your community. So if you have a certain percentage, Black, white, et cetera, in your community, the people registering for your programs by and large should match the people in the community. But we also started talking about things like, oh, if you don't have enough Black people in your programs, it means your programming doesn't appeal to Black people. And we had to be like, well, wait a second, there isn't always programming that appeals only to Black people and then programming that appeals only to white people, because that, if you go in that direction, then you're looking at all Black people as a monolith and that they only like these things and white people only like these things. And obviously there are ways that we group ourselves as humans based on similarities, and then the ways we can group ourselves based on differences. And we need to basically factor all of that in and embrace all of that and understand all of that. So we were finding ourselves dealing with allegations that either weren't specific or weren't true. And then trying to head in the direction of finding out what is an issue, what going on here at Ridgeville is actually an issue versus an allegation that's just, baseless. And so Dr. Effiam helped us in the form of that racial equity assessment, because it was supposed to be, this process where she looked at all these things. And as JC said, police call records. I think also police visits to the parks or something. You know, there's a way to look up like where the police go and what the outcomes of those things are, those calls and stuff. And unfortunately, the pandemic really got in the way of some of the elements of the assessment. We were supposed to have, help me out guys, town hall meetings and other ways that the community could engage in person in larger groups. And we just couldn't do that at all. So Dr. Effiam told us that she did focus groups, that she did interviews. But, you know, her final product, so to speak, of the assessment, what she put in writing and what she gave to us was very light on content. It was only maybe 2, 3, 4 pages total. And then the data itself, I think we never got from her. We were supposed to, and I don't think we got that far. So let me try to get back to the general approach I was trying to take. What I'm trying to say, and maybe I've said it already, I'll say it again though, is that she was trying to help us deal with where we were at that point in time and what was happening, the things that were being said, and dealing with them in a proper way, for lack of a better word. Like, we didn't have any mechanisms, any racial equity lens. We didn't have any tools, any specific, you know, policy, procedure, et cetera, for handling claims of racism. And so we had to start at the ground level in that sense for, you know, not only how do we deal with what's happening to us right now, but how do we deal with this in the future? I mean, this is the kind of thing where if somebody alleges that something happened that falls into that category of racism, we need to know how to handle that as an institution. And as JC said also, that racial equity lens is something she helped put together. We as a committee dug in really deep and asked a bunch of questions about it, and ultimately kind of asked her to reformat it. And I think, JC, was it you and Dr. Effiam that after that meeting where we really kind of pulled it apart and realized that instead of just question 1, 2, 3, 4, it needed to be more flowchart style, where it was like, depending on your answer to this one, it'll either go this way or this way. And then we kind of came up with an edited draft of the racial equity statement, and then, or racial equity lens, sorry. There was also, though, in terms of the documentation she gave us all at once, and I don't have it in front of me, it was an equity statement, a racial equity lens, and then something else. There was a third component, which I can't remember at the moment. We did get as far as having the board, you know, the committee brought that to the board and said, okay, we've worked on this and we're done with it. So we're going to present this to you and ask you as a board to officially approve this and integrate it into, you know, policy, et cetera. And so, and then the formation of the committee itself and how many community members we're supposed to have, how many staff members we're supposed to have, how many board members are supposed to be on the committee. That was stuff that Dr. Effiam helped us put together as well, that did get officially approved. So like JC said, we kind of want to, with whoever we work with next, we want to take a look at everything we've done and, you know, not spend forever on it, but spend some time assessing what it is we've done and why, and is that good, or do changes need to be made, why? And then, you know, again, to get back to the general, the goal was always to have equity be a focus and be a very important value in everything that we do as a park district, so that we're not just set up to deal with whenever somebody says something's gone wrong, but so that we are moving forward in a progressive way that always pays attention to equity and makes sure that everything we do is done in an equitable way. And so I would say, I don't know if people want to change that or add to it, but I would say that's where our goal is for moving into the next year, after sort of a review of what we've done, kind of trying to head in that direction, and making sure that as soon as possible, we're prepared as an entity to do these things on our own. That doesn't mean that we definitely don't want to have a consultant going into the next year. We haven't really gotten that far. You know, I'm definitely open to it. I would think everybody is as well, but we do want to be as trained and as educated as possible, so that we are kind of able to stand alone in some of those ways.
Tracy, before I add anything to what Martha said, do you have any other like questions or comments on all this big chunk of information that?
Yeah, no, this is super, super helpful. Did JC freeze?
Yeah, she's frozen for me too.
Um,
Maybe we should pause in case she's talking, because sometimes these. She's still frozen for everybody.
She's frozen for me, but Tracy, maybe you can go ahead because we all can hear you fine.
Yeah, I'll text Tracy just to make sure she knows she's frozen. She might know already though, but yeah, I agree. Tracy, go ahead.
yeah, I think this is very helpful. I'm excited to know that you all do have some sort of toolkit and are working on that. That's what I have worked on with the library, creating an equity toolkit for our programming. And so that there's always equity at top of mind when we're considering or building everything. And so what it really sounds like, so one thing I want us to be cautious about is, you know, Ridgeville is like an institution, right? It's one of the many, you know, park district life institutions. And so there are going to be things, because it's an institution that's been kind of systemic for decades, centuries, right? You know, there are going to be instances where there is going to be racism, right? Like, and we have to be able to catch it because it's so normal, right? It's been, these institutions have been functioning in this way, right, for so long that there are going to be instances of racism, whether, and it can't be like not intentional. It can be, you know, just it's already been baked in the systems from however long ago. And so we have to be able to like catch those, right? Like that's what we're dealing with, like the education system, right? We know the district is working really, really hard to make it an anti-racist space, but the system has been there and in place for centuries, right? It's going to take for, you know, every time you unpeel another, you know, a layer, there's something else that we have to address, right? And so, you know, that those things may come up with the community and as you all are doing this work. So I just want y'all to kind of just know that that can happen. And it's not like, it's not any doing of you all or like the current staff or anything. It's just as you continue to peel back this work, you're like, oh, we've been doing this way for X amount of time. And now as we're unpacking, oh, this shouldn't be happening this way anymore, you know? And so I just want y'all to kind of recognize that could happen. The lens, it seems like what you all are trying to do is create a space where everyone feels welcomed, right? Regardless of what it is, if you're interested, if you're doing an activity, and I'm just spewing things, this has nothing to do specifically with Ridgeville, right? But if folks want to come and learn about Hanukkah, doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be just for Jewish people, right? It could be anybody who's interested in learning about that religious holiday and what that means. They should be welcome to be able to come do that space, right? If we want to learn about how to speak Spanish, you know, like if folks want to come in, it doesn't necessarily need to be reserved for folks who are of Hispanic or Latinx, you know, heritage. It could be open for anybody who is interested in that. And so that's kind of the space that you all are trying to create with Ridgeville and with your community and with the programming that you're offering. And so I appreciate the equity lens because that's exactly what we need to be doing, is in that process, always considering questions about what it is that we're doing. Like you said, who's in the conversation, right? Who are we missing in this conversation? How do we get their feedback or their, you know, their opinion, right? And even the post assessment of everything, right? I love data. Data makes me, it's like worth more than oil, worth more than diamonds and gold. Like data is amazing. And so like pre and post assessments, taking a look at what you're planning on doing and then comparing it to what actually happened and having really good, I don't want to say postmortem because that sounds bad, but for, you know, just kind of unpacking and revisiting and looking at the program and what happened and what can we do different next time, right? So that we're constantly, right? And it's like a never ending thing. It's a circular thing. So regardless of whatever program, whether it's, you know, your summer camp program that runs from this day to that day, right? It's a consistent program. Every year we want to kind of look at it and review it and see what improvements can be done, what went well, and how do we continue to make it as equitable and inclusive as possible.
If I may, let me just add briefly that I attended the initial meeting that perhaps sparked some of this work. I did hear it differently. There were a lot of concerns with perceived racism that I thought called for a lot of reflection and action. And I've really been appreciative of the formation of this committee and the opportunity to work with it to address those issues.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. I want to piggyback off of what, Elaine just said too. Um, uh, what happened a couple years ago was the catalyst for this committee to start. But the outreach piece is something that Natalie was working on before I ever came to the park district. When I joined the park district, just by looking around, I could tell that it was not reflective of the community. So Natalie and I, attempted to put some things into place, but without having, really the knowledge and the skill that we even have now and compared to back then.
Yeah.
We weren't all that successful. But so as our time here is winding down, one of my questions that I do have for you is, clearly outreach is a big piece of what we need to be doing. Our community does not, a lot of them don't even know that we exist. I do think that we need to be able to figure out how we can adjust programming so we are better fitting the needs of our community. I think that goes without saying. But I'm curious in terms of, your expertise. Do you tend to lean more towards outreach as what you enjoy doing more? Or is this piece of like writing, policy and procedure and rewriting charter, is that something that you would say you would feel like as passionate about, or is
Outreach is really a key component in this work. Outreach is about building authentic relationships, and it's not just that's something that we're working on with the library right now. Like, we've shifted because of some of the work that I've done from just this whole survey collecting data model to an asset-based community development model, right? And so that's actually building relationships, getting to know what else is out there with Ridgeville, right, in the Ridgeville community. Who else can we partner with? Who else can we bring in? How do we build lasting relationships so that, when Martha's walking down the street, their kids walking past saying, "Hey, Martha, good to see you. It was fun to see you last week," right? And they're real authentic relationships, because that's how this actually works. And so my role at the library is about outreach. What I've done, it's always around equity, and I've loved working within the community and building those relationships. And I think that's an important part in the work for you all as well.
We all agree, absolutely. I also will say I feel like and please let me know if you feel differently. I feel like because we are still a new committee and we still have these other things to do, and because we're all volunteers, our time is limited. We're kind of looking at it from the point of view of like focusing on the policy and the procedure, especially because of COVID, right? I mean, we can do outreach, but not quite like we hopefully will be able to do in a year or two. Of taking this time to focus on the policy procedure charter piece, and then looking to really go like full force into outreach when we feel a little more solidified as a committee and a little more confident in what we're doing in a sense. So one of my questions is, would you feel comfortable, like if we were to have another consultant work with us on policy and procedure and such now, would you feel comfortable working with us in 3 months, 6 months, specifically on that outreach and having us using more than one consultant? Is that something that you would feel comfortable with?
Yeah, I wouldn't have a problem with that. I mean, I would like to know the consultant and would be, make sure that we all can work together collectively.
Absolutely.
But yes.
Absolutely. Okay. Do you have any other, questions or comments or, oh, Natalie.
I just wanted to ask a quick question because we're talking about outreach, and that obviously is a very important piece of the puzzle. Can you talk a little bit, Tracy, about what kind of outreach you do or have done in the past, or what you would recommend for a park district like us, like specifically what that outreach looks like?
Yeah, it all depends on what the goal is, right? So with Ingenuity supporting, all of Chicago public schools and arts education, my role was to develop a committee and create a strategy to outreach and build relationships with the schools that fell at the bottom half of the creative school survey. So they didn't really either have arts education, they didn't have programming, they didn't have community partners coming in. And so working with them to give them access to apply for a grant, helping them through the process, and then helping them through the implementing the program, because the end goal was to partner with like Joffrey Dance or like Goodman Theater or like a teaching artist or something, and bring a program that they don't have, an art discipline that they don't currently have in the building, to their students. And so working with those schools or working with a team to help those individual schools actually know about the application, apply, and get through the program. And so with that, just outreach, we went from just getting Category 4 schools were at the bottom, like barely had any arts, probably didn't even have an arts teacher. We went from getting like 4 applications to 17 applications and awarding 15 of those, just because of the outreach efforts in building strategies to maintain relationships so that folks can have, and most of the time those schools are under resourced, so they don't have the capacity to even apply. And so helping them through all of that process, and then the postmortem of the program to figure out what worked, what didn't work, so they can do it again. And so the next time they do it, we're not as much as hands-on with them as we were in the beginning. And like right now, what I'm doing with the library, I'm trying to do this, the Block party that's taking place on Saturday. And it's a lot of outreach, and a lot of the folks that are coming are folks that I've built relationships with in the past. And so Beloto's coming, and we have a relationship because our kids were in class together, and because, he came to some Ingenuity event, professional development events. We built that relationship. Dime Dance and Mr. Marcus, my son loved him, right? And so I call on him to do anything that I can because I appreciate his work, and we've built that relationship, right? Anti-Racist AF is being there because of that relationship that I have with folks. My relationship with the mayor, inviting him was easy. It was just a phone call, hey, can you come? Because of the relationship I had with a previous organization. So it's just all of what's going on Saturday is happening because of different relationship and outreach efforts. And that's what's really important in this work, and trying to work within communities, is building relationships and lasting, authentic relationships so folks can come, you all can call on each other whenever needed.
That's, I think in doing this work in Evanston, I think that's one of the challenges, right? Because there's so many of us are so connected to so many different people in Evanston, but our connections aren't going across communities. And I think that's the piece that we're really missing, both as a park district and as Evanston as a whole, is that our communities, each community is very interconnected, but they're not connected with each other. Yeah. And that's really that leap that I think that we all need to be making.
Yeah, I met some of your staff at Brummel Park a few weeks ago when we did the Evolution of Hip Hop event at Brummel Park with Mr. Marcus. And so we got to chit chat about what's going on, and it was just a fun community event, right? Folks were coming out from, neighbors were on their front lawn dancing and joining Mr. Marcus just because the music was there. Kids were outside, right? And it's just building community, right? And so for the library, folks come, we give them books, we give them kits, we talk about our programs, we ask them what they want, what they need from us. What is it that you're looking for from the library? So we can start providing more of what they are interested in. And that, sometimes, we have to give to get that information, right? It always, it's for me, we had at Ingenuity, we had schools complete a survey every year. And just for completing the survey, we gave them money for art supplies, right? Because they're giving us needed information. We need that data, right? And so for that information that we really need, they need art supplies. So it's always an exchange. It's never just, I need this information. And so that's something, that I'm always trying to have folks consider, their time and their thoughts, their information, their knowledge, their experience is invaluable. And we should be, it should be treated as such.
I really like that perspective. We do, we assume people want to share this information with us, and there needs to be an incentive, right? It's not just that I'm just going to take this information, it's just going to sit on the desk, right? We're really looking to take this. Here's the piece that you need. Here's the piece that I need, and let's build off of that. I like that perspective a lot. Do you, Tracy, do you have any other questions? Does anyone else on the committee have any questions before we wrap up? It's just after 10:30.
I think I got a good amount of information of where you all are at.
Awesome. Tracy, thank you so much for meeting with us again. I will also be honest, I was like, I wonder if she would ever be interested in serving on the board, or, just some things for you to think about for the future. I believe there is going to be a spot on the board opening up in the next election. So just plant some seeds while I can.
I'm thinking about it. Definitely. Thank you.
Excellent.
I have a quick question. I don't know if we've covered this with Tracy already, so I apologize if we have. talking about specific availability in terms of start date and
Thank you.
also you know, the idea of the fact that we currently meet twice a month on the first and third Thursday. That, you know, the structure we had with Dr. Effiam was supposed to be that she was attending our committee meetings and attending board meetings. We can tweak that as needed, but in terms of how we actually work with our consultant moving forward, in the form of when, you know, we just want to make sure we kind of line up schedules and timing expectations. Did we go over that at all previously?
We talked about it a little bit. I think it wasn't as specific as the first and third Thursday, but I think I knew it was like twice a month and some board meetings, depending on if my feedback or, you know, anything I needed to share would be, I mean, you all probably be best to cover or repeat or share with the rest of the board what's going on in the committee, but there may be times where I may be asked to join. That works. I think it would be helpful for me because we're going to start the Next Steps programming soon again. So just hopefully the plan is to kick it off October, November. So it would just be helpful for me to know so that I can plan around those dates and times.
Okay, and you are available pretty much immediately in terms of when you
Yeah.
can start with us? Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you.
For sure.
Well, thank you
Excellent. Well,
for meeting with us this morning, and thank you for the beautiful work you're doing with the library and the Chicago schools. And I just really appreciate your sharing with us what your experience has been in those areas.
Oh, thank you. It's been nice.
Absolutely agreed.
Too.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, we will be in touch. Thank you so much for your time. It was great talking to you again. And
Thank you. Thank you. Y'all have a great day. It's supposed to be a nice one, so enjoy.
You too.
excellent. Thank you.
So much.
Bye.
Thank you.
This is Natalie. I'll make a motion to go into executive session.
This is Martha. I'll second.
All right. Roll call vote. Natalie Salee,
Yes.
Elaine Siegel,
Yes.
Ida Nolan,
Yes.
Martha Gaines,
Yes.
JC Herman. Yes. All right. We're out of executive session. I will entertain a motion for our next step for our consultant.
This is Natalie. I'll make a motion that we recommend Dr. Logan to the board to be our equity consultant for the current fiscal year.
Ida Nolan, I second that motion.
Any discussion? All right, roll call vote. Natalie Salee,
Yes.
Martha Gaines,
Yes.
Elaine Siegel,
No.
Ida Nolan,
Yes.
JC Herman, yes. Awesome. I am so appreciative for all of you. I am so proud and happy. This is who our committee is. From my insides out. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, JC.
Thank you,
Thank
JC.
everybody.
All right, we are good to shut down our meeting 50 minutes late.
Martha Gaines, I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
Natalie Salee, I'll second.
All right, roll call. Natalie Salee,
Yes.
Martha Gaines,
Yes.
Elaine Siegel,
Yes.
Ida Nolan,
Yes.
and JC Herman, yes. Thank you all so much. See you all soon.
Thank
Bye.
you.